Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the support tier list for 11.4. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Just free, easy, just a couple of clicks. Come by, check out the stream. Starts every night around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Usually goes till 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. I try to be as conversational as possible with the chat while I'm playing. And then we do tons of fresh patch notes and tier lists for every patch. And we have lots of topical guides like best one trick, how to micro better, how to macro better, individual champion guides, coaching sessions, and dozens of more guides on the channel. So be sure to check all that out. And if you like it, be sure to like and subscribe. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So there aren't that many things that are coming on this patch, I think, that will change the support meta too much. There is a nerf to Moonstone Renewer, which could be pretty significant at the end of the day. They're basically dropping 20 heal off of the front part of it, but it's the same on the back part. So around sort of the mid-game, level 9 or so, whenever you complete this item, you're probably going to be losing 10 off the base, and then somewhere around 15 to 20 off of the fully ramped up Moonstone, which does add up over time. That's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, maybe 10% less healing. But you got to keep in mind that gets compounded by runes like Revitalize, Spirit Visage in terms of items, and then any stats like plus healing and shielding. So that can make a pretty big difference. So if Moonstone on average was healing for something like 5,000 on 11.3, it'll probably heal for like 4,500 or so now. And they are empowering some of the other Grievous Wounds items, so it'll make it more attractive for people to bump it up from that 40%, like the Oblivion Orb, all the way up to something like Morellonomicon for the 60%. So that is going to hurt enchanters a little bit on this patch, especially ones that are very heavily indexed towards healing, that don't have a lot of other stuff going on. Everfrost is an interesting rune, or an interesting item that's getting buffed, but it's still going to be 3,400 gold, which I think is too expensive for most supports. If they dropped it down to 32, then it might be an interesting rune on, some close range supports, maybe like Rakan to chain the CC together there, like maybe Veigar support. But it's just too much money as it is, I think. Gensu's getting buffed a little bit. Will make Vayne a little bit better. Will make Senna a little bit better, but shouldn't affect the AD meta too much. The jungle position, we'll just see how that shakes out. If we go to very early game junglers, that's going to favor tanks because they can fight, they have more CC, they're more durable in the early game. But if we keep seeing some of the power farm junglers that just don't gank that much early, then it might be better for enchanters. But overall, I think it's probably negative for enchanters, plus for tanks. Kai'Sa's getting tapped, not going to matter. She's still going to be really strong. Samira's getting gutted, so that takes a little bit of value away from something like an Alistar, maybe, who pairs really well together with her, but I don't think it'll make that much of a difference. Braum is getting a specific buff here, 20 extra second cooldown, so you might choose him with some other like really fast attack speed champs, so most notably like Lucian with his double tap, but then maybe things like Vayne. He can counter stuff like Seraphine's ult fairly well, Miss Fortune's ult, so you might see him in some spots, but I don't think it's going to be that much. Soraka is getting some nice buffs. 10 base heal on the W and extra movement speed. It's Grievous Wounds I still think are going to be very suppressive towards her. But if you are against things like maybe a Maokai or an Ezreal or some other like really heavy poke champs, and I do think Ezreal is going to be more powerful on this patch, then that's going to make Soraka a lot stronger, especially the base healing on that W. So that is nice. Veigar, that'll help Veigar support out a little bit with the lower cooldown on the ult as well as the lower cooldown on Q, so you can just spam Qs. So that might be okay if you want a really heavy AP threat and they have a lot of melee on their team so that you can really abuse the cage. And especially if you're just kind of in a farm off lane and you can just spam Qs on them, if they're not going to be that aggressive early on, then that could be a pretty good option. But that's pretty much it as far as support goes. So let's go ahead and get into the actual ranking itself. Okay, so I still think that Maokai is going to be number one. I've been spamming Maokai a lot. He has a 61% win rate in Pro right now. He has a 53% win rate in Platinum Plus. So, but he's down to like a 3% play rate. A lot of people stopped playing him after he got a couple of nerfs a few patches ago. You can see the play rates really fell off. But the win rate really didn't. Like down in Silver, it sort of fell off a little bit. But I think a lot of it is people maybe just don't leverage his vision advantage as much as they should. But in almost every other ELO bracket, it's pretty close to kind of what the average was. It sort of fluctuates a little bit, but statistically, he's still really good. And as you can see, his chart, he just does extremely well as the game goes on because he scales super well with items. And a few things that I like about Malachi, and if you've ever watched my stream recently, you know that I've been playing a lot of him. But the most notable thing about him are these saplings. They are really, really OP. So it's only on a 10-second cooldown. You throw these in a bush. They last for a minimum of 30 seconds. They watch the bush for you. They give you vision. And if anyone comes close, once you get these maxed out by level 9, even with no items, even after the nerfs, they're still going to do like 550 to 600 base damage. That's more than most ultimates on something that's a 10-second cooldown that lasts for 30 seconds. So it's extremely difficult to walk through to try to get to objectives. I've had some people on stream say, well, what if they just never go to bushes? It's like, okay, well, if they want to do that, you get every dragon and baron. So basically, you just really want to pick your fights around dragons, barons. You don't want to ARAM. But he just does a ton of damage off of that. So it's a lot of poke damage, but it also applies to slow 2 seconds, non-decaying 35% slow. So even if like a gank is coming in on your team and you just need to slow the enemy, just throw the seed really far ahead of them, and you can still get that slow. And it still does decent damage. I mean, it's 200, or I guess 125 base damage plus 8% of their maximum health, even if it's not in a bush. So it's still going to do like, 250 damage. So yeah, it's not whatever, 550, 600, but it's still like pretty good damage. So he has all of that, and it's 1100 range to throw that, so that's so much safer than having to walk up in wards. That really makes him the king of vision throughout the whole game. Control wards don't shut out the vision either, just like with Zyra plants. So it really makes him the king of vision, because he just basically just gets dozens and dozens of extra wards once you start getting ability haste and just throwing seeds everywhere. So it's incredibly difficult to sneak up and flank him. And he just puts out a lot of damage. I mean, he's almost always good in my games for like 25,000 damage, which most of the time is going to be, second or third DPS, sometimes even as high as number 1, even if you don't go for the full DPS items. So he has a lot of utility and just does a lot of free damage for no reason on his seeds pretty much. It's really OP. Then the items that you get on him, I still think that Imperial Mandate is the best way to go. Yes, they did nerf this interaction on him last patch, but it's still fine. Mandate's still going to put up 1,500 to 2,000 damage, which is respectable. It's not as good as like the 4,000 it used to put up, but it's still pretty good. And don't forget, it also gives that extra movement speed. Right, so whenever your ally converts the second part of the Mandate proc, then you get 20% movement speed and they get 20% movement speed. So whenever your seed walks up and hits somebody out of a bush, and then your AD carry walks up and auto attacks them, they're slowed by 35% and your AD carry is sped up by 20%. So it's just really good for extra movement around fights as well. So that's the most common build on him. That's really strong. And then he has a lot of other options, and really it's hard to tell what you're supposed to do in every situation. If you're not 100%, I think just going Mandate into Demonic Embrace is the most common combination of items. It gives a pretty high win rate. He's also an excellent user of Oblivion Orbs. You can get that early. And the reason that I like it on him is because, first of all, his first item is cheap. So it's only 2,500 versus if you're going Zyra or Brand, you're going to have to get Liandry's, which is 3,400. So he can get it way earlier, and then he can get an Oblivion Orb way earlier, so he can start cutting that plus healing and shielding if they have Moonstone or Goredrinker on their team. So you can get Mandate plus Oblivion Orb for basically the same price as a Liandry's. So that's really, really strong. It gets him very far ahead of the curve. And then you can take Morellonomicon if you want. It is getting 10 free extra ability power on this patch. It's going to give you a lot of ability power, a lot of health. Or you can get the Chemtank Putrefier. And if you take Font of Life, which I take a lot on him, I usually go Aftershock plus Font, then this is a really cost-efficient item. It's only 2,300 gold. Now, Morello's not that much more, but this also gives you 100% mana regen and 20 extra ability haste. That just means you can spam even more seeds, which converts to a lot of extra damage and a lot of extra vision. And how this works is whenever you CC somebody, they get the Font debuff on them, and then whenever your ally auto-attacks them, then they get that empowered 60% Grievous Wounds for 3 seconds that refreshes every time they attack, because it's going to keep healing them off of Font, and it's going to keep reapplying that 60%. So that's why I really like this, is because, once you hit them with any CC, basically this is going to be up for 60 seconds as long as they keep auto-attacking the target. And it's at all sort of breakpoints in their health bar, right? Versus Morello, it does have more AP, it does have more health on it, but the extra 60% only applies if they're below 50% health. So for the first 50%, it's not going to reduce the healing. So if they're getting shielded and healing, you know, it might be a while before they drop below that 50% on some of these mega tanks. And frankly, I mean, the ability power is not that great on him. It's okay. But the main reason that you get AP on him are the procs, right? It's because the Mandate proc does quite a bit of damage, and the Demonic Embrace does a lot of damage. But AP itself is not that great on the seeds. You only get an extra, I think, 1.8% max health damage per seed that you throw down. So it's not that great. And then, like, his ult has a 0.75. He has okay ratios, but it's not fantastic. So losing the 20 extra AP is not that big of a deal. Losing the 250 health does matter, but remember with this, you're saving 200 gold, you're getting the 20 ability haste, and you're getting the base mana regen, and you're getting a better proc, in my opinion. So if you have Font of Life, if you're going after Shock, I think that Chem Tank is a wonderful second item. So that's what I'll usually get, is some combination of Demonic Embrace, Chem Tank, and Mandate. And I think that's the best way to go if you want to do like pretty respectable damage. And like I said, I like Aftershock. There are other runes that are also good. Arcane Comet is pretty nice, especially if you want to go straight for Demonic Embrace and not get the Putrefier. Demonic Embrace doesn't have any mana regen on it. So having the extra mana off a Mana Flow Band can be handy, and this is going to give you a lot more poke in the early game. Usually Comet is good for about 1,000, maybe 1,500 damage in games, so it does add up. And then Scorch is usually good for a couple hundred in the laning phase. So pretty good early on if they don't have healing and you're going to be able to push them out of lane with some extra poke. That can be handy. Transcendence is okay. It does give you the 10 ability haste later, and you know, once you get a takedown, you do get a 20% reduction on your abilities. So that is pretty cool. But I still like the secondaries over here. You have Font, which allows you to go for the Putrefier. It allows you to get Staff of Flowing Water, which a lot of people don't get that on Maokai, but it's still really powerful. It still gives 1,000 extra gold per person that you affect. And every single ability that you have can put Font on them, which effectively puts Staff of Flowing Water on them. So I think that's a really good underrated option for him. And then you just get good value, right? Like you can get Conditioning, which is going to heal you for, you know, hundreds of extra HP in a game, or you can get Conditioning, which is 500 or 600 extra gold worth of resistances later in the game. And then you can get Overgrowth, which scales up and is going to end up giving you, you know, usually like 400 or 500 gold worth of HP. So it's just really good bargains on the secondary runes. Now, another build that has been gaining in popularity lately, and I haven't practiced this as much, but I just want to throw it out there, is kind of this tank Maokai build, even in the support role. You're starting to see percentage-wise, it's definitely stepping up, right? So going Turbo Chem Tank or getting Dead Man's Plate. So you get one of those first, either Dead Man's or Chem Tank, and then after that, you end up getting the other one. So if you go Chem Tank first, then you can get Dead Man's second. Or if you do Dead Man's first, you can get Chem Tank second. Then with that one, you would want to go for Thornmail probably, which is not nearly as cost efficient as the Putrefier. My one question with that build is like, how are you putting seeds down? Because you have no mana regen with those builds. So this is the top ranked Maokai guy right now, apparently. And he's kind of all over the place. He's been mixing and matching stuff. But within the last day or so, he has done kind of this tank build. It's just to kind of give you an idea of what he went with it. He actually did Turbo Chem Tank, and then it looked like in this one he built Gargoyle Stoneplate, which is super expensive. But over here, he just pretty much got to the Chem Tank. And then he likes to go for Celerity and Water Walking, which this is good if you're going to roam around a lot as far as secondaries go. I personally like taking the free boots and biscuits. I think the biscuits really help out a lot with the early trades, and it gives you 150 total mana, and then the boots saves you 300 gold, so you get your Mandate a lot faster. But yeah, so I'd have to study this more, but there are some more top-end Maokais that are looking at that. So if you need that like really hard engaged tank, then he can operate as that. You're not going to have as much seed access. I would think personally, and I have seen some doing this, I don't know if I've seen it recently here, but I think it would be interesting to try out Presence of Mind plus the Tenacity rune. If you're going to go for the tank version, like this guy just pretty much does the Comet Mandate version. It just usually goes Demonic Embrace, and this is kind of the most standard version you can get. It's going to put out sort of the maximum amount of damage. But anyways, that's what most people are doing, but there are those tank options. So I'll just have to try it out. But that's another thing that just makes him really good is like if you need to be that primary tank, if you need to have some kind of engage on your team, then you can operate as that because when you run forward and press W, they can't outplay it, right? If you get in range, Vayne can't tumble out of that, right? Lucian can't E out, they can't flash out. I mean, they can, but you're going to follow them, right? And so he is historically very, very good at sticking to targets if he gets within that W range. It's just can you get close enough to do it? Well, Kim Tank allows you to do that. So I'll have to try it out, see what the mana is. I think if you go Presence of Mind and the Tenacity rune, that might be enough value just to give you enough mana to be able to still put out a decent amount of seeds. But we'll have to see. Yeah, tons and tons of different combinations and playstyles and itemization choices you can pick with them. I think I even saw someone who was going like mandate into like Dead Man's. So if you want to kind of split the difference and be a little squishier but have some kind of engage, you can do that as well. Might be good if they have a lot of AD. So tons and tons of options there in terms of itemization and playstyles. Okay, and then Rel is another one that I'll put here. So I do want to try to make this faster. I just wanted to mention the Maokai stuff because I play him a lot, and so I'm learning a lot of stuff about him, and he's just so versatile, and there's so many different options that I just wanted to cover some of that there. Rel has definitely been creeping up a lot. People figured her out on this last patch, 11.3. She has very good engage with her W if you go in a horse form because it allows you to run at them really quickly and then flip them over you, which stuns them for a little bit. And then you can chain that together with your E for another stun, and then you can use your ult to pull them back into your team, or at least just keep them still if you want to. So that's kind of the best innovation that I've seen is you don't always have to jump off the horse and go for the knock up. You can just mount up and go on the horse and charge and flip them over you. So both of those are pretty good options, and that fixes the part where she's supposed to be really immobile when she engages. If you go from dismounted to mounted, then you're very, very mobile, and you can run away with them pretty quickly once you get them with your ult. But yeah, it just does a ton of damage. Not a ton, but like pretty respectable damage. Pretty good chain CC combinations, AoE root, or AoE, I guess, disable if they don't have a some sort of dash. I don't remember what exactly they called it, but going to be pretty good overall. And then you can go for the Legend Tenacity or the Triumph if you want to. It's a super tanky, pretty reasonable engage. Typically just going to go for a Locket into Zeke's. I don't think people are doing Kim Tank on her. There are some people trying it out. I mean, it does have a 2% higher win rate. Now, Shurelya's is one I was kind of curious about. They did just give her new AP ratios, but it does have a high win rate, but I'm afraid you might be a little too squishy with that. But yeah, it's just typical tank items. Just lock it into either Zeke's or Knight's Vow, and you can also get Bramble Vest if you want to get some Grievous Wounds. I think Bramble Vest is not as good as Oblivion Orb just because they have to hit you personally in order to get the Grievous. So if they're not targeting you, if they're just targeting the 80 carry or something like that, then, you know, maybe there's some problems there. But anyways, so very tanky, pretty fast on rotations when you're mounted. Good just AoE CC, respectable AoE damage with her ult. Just pretty solid overall champion right now. And then of course you get like just some of the intangible stuff like giving your ally, you know, some extra armor, being able to shred armor off of enemies. A big one is that her Q actually fully breaks shields. So if you're against some of these Sterix users, which are very popular, and this is probably leading to a lot of her success, whenever that Sterix pops, you just use your Q and just break it instantly. So make sure you're holding onto your Q if they have the potential for a big shield. So that could be Sterix, that could be Set, that could be just like a really big like Janna or Lulu shield. That could be Locket. Locket shields get broken by that. That's another huge one. So just try to get that really nice value out of the Q if you see a situation for it. You just have to put 1 point in it in order to get that. So anyways, very strong. I just don't play her a lot. She does require some practice, but I think she is the top tier tank right now if you can practice her, if you can get good on her. Okay, and then Seraphine is getting indirectly nerfed on this patch by the Moonstone nerf, but I still think she'll be pretty strong because a lot of her power comes from her utility. So yes, it is nice that, you know, she does get a lot of Moonstone healing, and she was nerfed last patch. So she went from like 54% of support to like 53.3. So it really didn't matter that much. The Moonstone might take her down another percent to like 52.5. But I still think she'll be very good if you're good on her. But she just brings a lot to the table. Just that AoE shield plus movement speed off of the W is just really tremendous in team fights. And then, of course, her ultimate has like a billion range and just is a massive CC chain with your E. You can root the enemy team for like 2.5 seconds. It's a very, very long time. So, yeah, any sort of team fight comp where you're going to be able to force them to all group up and you've got your ult ready to go and you hit that on 2 or 3 people in a fight, it's pretty much lights out. On top of all the other utility that you have, the movement speed, the random poke that you can put out with your Q, the Moonstone, Staff of Flowing Water. Yes, both of these did get nerfed, but yes, they are still very strong. The Putrefier was a great buff for you. The Ionians were a great buff. So she just has really, really good in a lot of situations. Now, she can be hard engaged on by things like a Leona, and if they do have, if we do move to this early game, like hard camp meta, if you start seeing Rammus all the time, Udyr, and then even if you start to see the return of stuff like Jarvan, Lee Sin, Rek'Sai, all of these like level 2 gankers, it can be kind of tricky. And it is difficult to get vision later on in the game if you're against a lot of assassins because you are squishy and you do have to pretty much walk up and face check bushes. Like, yeah, you can throw Qs in there if you want to, but they might be able to dodge some of that. So I don't know. It's always a little spooky late game with an enchanter that doesn't have like a really good dash to get vision, or if you're like rotating between lanes and you get caught out by something with a lot of CC, you're probably going to die. So she is very, very good in team fights, but like most enchanters, she is going to be a little bit vulnerable on rotations and when you're trying to ward later on in the game. And then Leona is the next one that I have up here. Now, I think Leona is going to move up just a little bit more because the Moonstone users are getting knocked down. And as a lot of analysts are saying, and once again, I'm not sure if I buy into this yet, but they're saying it might be an early game like turbo gank meta if the camps aren't worth as much. Junglers might start taking more risks, so you might start seeing less of like the Karthus and the Lilia and these other like power farm junglers and just more of these like early game get in there and kill stuff type of meta. And she's awesome with that. Anything that has extra pressure where the jungler is going to come down, just almost a guaranteed kill if you have Leona. Tons and tons of pressure early, lots of damage. Really good with Locket, really good with Zeke. Just anything that's going to give her a lot more CDR so that she can just spam her ult and just make plays over and over again. So very strong champ. I think her matchup, she does start to fall off a little bit later. She still has the CC, but she can't get Staff of Flowing Water. She doesn't have access to really good Grievous Wounds. Like you can get Thornmail, but it's not as great. And I feel like her matchup, let me see what her matchups are. I feel like she's probably not great in a rel. So at the support role, yeah, not great in a rel, not great in a Bard, Galio, who are not that popular. And then she's like, okay, it's about 50-50 with stuff like Maokai and Seraphine. So she does reasonably well against a lot of the top picks. It's just, you might want to consider banning rel because trying to run into, engage on a rel is very difficult. Just because she counter engages so well by being able to mount up, stun, root, and then pull everyone away with her R. But other than Rel, it's pretty good matchups against most of the mainstream champs. So pretty strong. Not a lot to say about her. People know a lot about her. It's just the really low cooldowns are what make her strong. Her ult's on a 90-second cooldown, and then her Q, the basically point-click auto attack stuns, like a 1.25 second stun on a 5-second cooldown, and then her E gets down to like a 6-second cooldown. And the fact that she can engage anytime, anywhere. She can go over walls, she can go through minions, all of her abilities, her R and her E and her Q, bypass anyone trying to peel her. So she can just go straight through Braum, straight through, just anything that's in her way and get to that backline. So she has some of the best backline access in the game if you can get ahead early. It is kind of rough later on if you're behind because if you get caught out, like you're going to die. You don't have any escapes in your kit, so... And she doesn't get any items, once again, that amplify your teammates that much, aside from Locket. But nevertheless, I still think she's going to be pretty good. Okay, and then moving into the next few champs here. Now, I think that Lulu and Yuumi are both very volatile champs, but are probably the best, high-scaling champs, other than maybe Seraphine can hang with them. But these champs are extremely dangerous if the enemy team, or if your team has a really fed hyper carry champion like a Kai'Sa or a Vayne specifically, but also if you have like a Master Yi or just anything else that's like an auto attack, on hit base champ that can do a lot of damage, they're going to be very strong. So Lulu has the higher win rate. And she is probably second only to Seraphine, I think, right now in terms of overall power. Win rate wise, they're about even. But she gets banned a lot less and picked a lot less. There's a lot of stuff that brings Lulu into the fold. First of all, she has had several buffs as well. Her shield is actually pretty big. I think it's 240 base. And it does not decay. So unlike Soraka's, which decays over 2.5 seconds, Lulu stays the entire time. And then whenever you shield somebody, you basically give them usually around 80 effective on-hit damage with picks. It's on attack. They basically do an extra 80 damage or so, and it scales really well with AP. And then, so that's really nice. But then your W also increases their movement speed and their attack speed. Now, I think the attack speed got a little nerfed on it, but it's still like 35% attack speed, and I think it's like 30% movement speed. So it's a very, very good buff to put on some of these champions that want to run people down and kill them. Or it can double as a polymorph. So if they have some kind of assassin that really relies on mobility, so especially if it's something like Zed, LeBlanc, Echo, Fizz, things like that. If they try to go on somebody, you can just R to give them an infusion of health that bypasses Grievous Wounds. It's not a heal. It's an infusion of health, which used to be bad. When you would get a lot of plus healing and shielding in the past, she would just get outscaled by stuff like Soraka and Sona, who scaled way better with plus healing and shielding. But now that plus healing and shielding is kind of a liability because there's so much Grievous Wounds in the game right now, then having this thing that bypasses Grievous Wounds is actually super useful. So you can just ult, knock them up, and then polymorph the assassin if you want to with your W. So she just really ruins a lot of assassins unless they are like mega fed. And being able to apply that slow with your R, or the polymorph or whatever. But remember, whenever you use the R on somebody, it slows them by a certain amount for 3 seconds. So the stuff's kind of wigging out here, but it slows them. It's not saying how much it is, but it's some amount. It slows them by like 30% for like 7 seconds or something. So if you put this on the tank, it's just going to keep reapplying the Font of Life, which is going to allow you to keep reapplying Staff of Flowing Water, like I mentioned earlier with Maokai. So she's a very good staff user because pretty much all of her abilities, well, not her E, but the other 3 abilities can all apply the Staff of Flowing Water really well. So yeah, she just synergizes really well, and then you are a healing threat because of the Moonstone Renewer. Attacks or abilities in combat, they gain this extra healing. So yes, she is going to be hit by that, by less healing, but the fact that she has so much other stuff, she has, these triple buffs you can put on 80 carries between the picks, on-hit damage, the movement speed, the attack speed, and then she has the ult, which bypasses Grievous Wounds. She has the shield with her E, which can be pretty big, which also bypasses Grievous Wounds. So she's one of the least affected champions by Grievous with multiple buffs to put on your carry. And just a lot of utility. Like, she can't engage herself, but just putting that W on like a Hecarim or an Olaf or Darius or whatever, just to run them in there, can be a really powerful interaction as well. So extremely good on these 3 items, and the fact that Ionians got buffed is phenomenal as well, because you really, really want ability haste, and now you can get 40, and I would maybe even consider getting the rune to go to 48, the little minor rune, 48 ability haste, because your spells are very strong, but they're on kind of a long cooldown. Like your W's 12 seconds, and then your shield I think is 8 seconds. So getting those down is huge. And the polymorph, the W, is one of the most powerful abilities in the game. It's a 2.25 second disable, basically, pretty much a stun or a massive buff. So it's just really, really good. So she is someone who has benefited more than almost anyone else in the support role from the different itemization options that are now available. Now, I would personally take Guardian over Aerie just to keep you alive and to help keep your ally alive long enough through burst so that you can ult and polymorph and shield. It is kind of curious that she falls off pretty hard on her second item. That's very strange. I would think that her chart would go straight up. What is the win rate on this? Okay, so it's about the same as Aerie. Basically, Aerie is going to give you more harassment in the early game, but this is going to be, Guardian is going to give you the free burst protection in your kit, and then you get the other stuff that I talked about with Maokai, the Font of Life, and then the trading, and you can also get Revitalize, which helps out a ton with Moonstone. I mean, it's pretty much giving you an extra 5 to 15% healing on people with Moonstone, and then you can get Boots plus Biscuits as secondary, or Boots plus Cosmic Insight as secondary, both of which are just really, really good values. So I would personally not index so heavily towards the early game with the Aerie plus Scorch. If you are going to be able to get them to take a bad back and lose a lot of gold or something, I could maybe see that being valuable, but outside of the laning phase, Scorch really doesn't do that much, especially because you don't have a lot of poke. You know, at least on Maokai, people are going to be running into Seeds all game, and it's going to tack on an extra 30 damage, you know, on that. But, like, you're not poking them late game with Scorch. The only time you're going to hit them is in all-ins, in, like, big fights most of the time. And so it's just not going to contribute that much damage in the long run. Now, Transcendence is good. This is a pretty good one. So, I mean, it's not like this is bad. I also think you're getting so many mana regen items. Like, every item you're going to get is going to have mana regen on it. And once again, you're not poking. Like, you're saving your mana for all-ins most of the time. So, like, you don't need that much mana outside the laning phase. You know, unlike Maokai, again, who's going to be spamming Seeds everywhere, the mana is, like, really nice. But... or if you're playing, you know, Lux or Vel'Koz or something, then yeah, the mana's going to be really good. But I just don't think you need it that much on Lulu. So it's like, this stuff is nice in the sorcery tree, but I think it's kind of a luxury, and I would rather just have, like, better protection from the Resolve tree, and then get the free boots so that you can get that Moonstone faster, and then get that Staff of Flowing Water faster. 300 gold's a very big deal for support, so... and the 10 movement speed's definitely relevant as well. So, anyways, that's how I would build her, but statistically, it's about the same either way. But yeah, super strong champ right now. Yuumi's another one who has one of the most divisive champions in League of Legends. A lot of people hate her, some people love her, but she's so volatile. She can feel like she's just absolutely worthless and doesn't do anything, or she can feel like she's the most overpowered champ in the game. And some of it is dependent on your allies. You know, people always say she's fully dependent on your allies. And that's sort of the case. But, you know, with how much, like, snowball potential is out there and just how much damage some of these champs can do that are really popular in the meta, there's a pretty high probability in most team comps that someone is going to do all right. So, yeah, she really can't do a lot if your whole team just gets dumpstered. So that's what makes her really volatile. But if just one person on your team starts to go off and they're really strong, she can just completely just push them over the edge, right? Like, there's a game the other day, there was a Master Yi on the enemy team, and he just got to like 3 or 4 kills, and we could not kill him. It was like 4v1 with the Yuumi on top of him. Just couldn't kill him because she puts so many buffs on people, right? With her W, she ends up giving them either extra AD or AP for free, and then her E ends up being a pretty decent heal and gives movement speed and attack speed. So it's kind of like Lulu. She's got the triple buff thing going on. But then she also has this ultimate that's like a really big AoE root. I think it's like for a really long time too. I feel like it's like 1.75 seconds. It's a very long time. And then the Q's kind of whatever outside the laning phase. It's okay. It does some damage. But it's really just the scaling on the E, and then the W, and then the R. Now, she does have some huge mana problems, so you have to get kills and assists. You cannot spam stuff that much outside of fights, but in fights, when you're getting the resets on Presence of Mind, the mana is not like that big of a deal. And the big thing about Yuumi is when you're on some of these champs that are just like super, you know, hyper carry 1v9 champs, they can't target you. So you're basically invulnerable, right? If you attach yourself to this Master Yi that's constantly just killing everybody, or you attach yourself to Olaf or something like that, or Darius, and just give them that movement speed and lock them up, they can't hit you. So she's super strong. One of the best if you have a duo and someone who can start going off like that. Just disgusting with stuff like Twitch, because you go invisible with the Twitch whenever he goes invisible. So that's one of the best combinations early game if you don't completely get dumpstered. Then she's excellent with stuff like Twitch or Evelynn or just anything else that's going to be going invisible like that. But anyways, very volatile. Definitely much better if you have a duo, someone that you can count on that's going to get pretty fed. But as you can see, just bottom left to upper right, just hyper scaling champ. So yes, a lot of people, you have a low win rate because it doesn't seem like it's that hard to play her, and mechanically it's not, but the decisions are what's really difficult because you get hard punished for mispositioning, right? Because if you get caught out, if you're trying to ward and you don't have anyone around to save you, and like the jungler shows up, you're dead, right? If you try to go save somebody who's doing something stupid and they're about to die, like they're tower diving, and you try to help them, you're dead. So you have to really learn how to abandon people and be very conservative with your vision placement with Yuumi, right? You just cannot take a lot of risks with her, so you have to be disciplined. But she's very, very good in the right circumstances. She's one of the best, like, amplifiers. If someone on your team is winning, she just takes them into, like, hyperdrive. Just very, very strong champ. So, yeah, I don't think she's going to be fantastic in every situation, but there are a lot of situations where she feels extremely OP. So there's that. Okay, and then Rakan, I still think is pretty good. I think he's one of the more underrated supports out there. He is getting picked some in Pro, I think. Now, the buff to Ionian boots were very nice for him because, kind of like Lulu, he has really long cooldowns that are very high impact. He does not fight super well in the early game. Aren't that many games on this patch. Yeah, I mean, he's 6-1 right now on 11.3, so he's not the most picked champ, but he does have an 86% win rate, so there's that. But then even back on 11.2, I feel like if we're looking at Pro, he's still 52%, which wasn't crazy. So in Pro, he's all right. In solo queue, he's better than people think he is. People are used to him being 48%, but I think he's like 50 or 51% right now. So statistically, yeah, he's about 50%. Statistically, he's in one of the best places he's been in a long time. He's just really hard to play. Kind of like he's got Yuumi-itis, where mechanically, he's not that difficult, right? There aren't that many skill shots with him that matter, that are hard to hit, right? Like your Q in the laning phase, but it's, you know, if you hit your Qs, it does matter, but it's not going to like make or break a team fight most of the time if you miss your Q. But it's just the positioning, right? What do you try to do? Do you try to save this person? Do you try to peel? Do you try to engage? How many people should you hit with your ult? Do you just go on the first person, the R plus W, or do you try to tag 2 or 3 more people? That's something I'm guilty of, and that's one of the biggest traps as Rakan is you try to do too much. You go on the first person, and then you see that one other person that's just a little bit further away, and you try to run towards them, and then you get chain CC'd and blown up, or someone on your team backs up, and you don't have anyone to E to jump out anymore. So it can be very tricky to negotiate where you should be and, you know, how you should position in fights. Now, they did buff Shurelya's quite a lot, and that has been pretty useful for him. I think statistically it hasn't really mattered that much, honestly. He was like 53% with Shurelya's. I thought this was going to be a lot better than it has been on him buff-wise. Mandate is still close in value. Moonstone is still like in the conversation. So there are a few different items you can take on him to help him out. But sort of his main thing and why you would pick Rakan is he's a very good engage that can also comfortably get some of the really big buffs in the game. So like having the Shurelya's to help your whole team engage, being able to get stuff like Staff of Flowing Water or Ardent Censer to buff up your carries. He can get those things, and he's not sacrificing that much because he does not have to build tanky. So he's one of the only engages that doesn't have to build like personal tank items. Now, Locket is also a really good buff that a lot of the tanks can get, and that's something that's new to this season. There was Locket in the past season, but there was a much higher strategic cost for it in Season 10. You were giving up a lot of stuff to get Locket if you wanted something that buffed your allies up significantly. I guess Zeke's did it a little bit, but either way, he's lost a little bit of his value this season in that the tanks do have some buff options now, stuff like Locket or Abyssal Mask, which you don't see a lot. You know, they have some better tools. So in losing Athene's Unholy Grail and the change to Zeke's really hasn't been that great for him. I guess the win rate's still okay, but it feels like it's not as strong as it was last season. But nevertheless, he's still really good. Like, the main thing against him is if they have a lot of CC and they lock you down, you're going to die. So you have good engage, but it's hard for you to stay in a longer fight and lock people down. You really want fast fights. It's difficult. It's a little bit more difficult for you to face check really high damage teams, especially with a lot of CC. So, like, you can W and run away, but you know, if they lock you down with Leona or something, you're just going to get, or Rel or something like that, you're just going to get blown up most of the time. So it is a little more difficult to control vision later on in the game if you lose control of a key area around like Baron or Dragon. And he doesn't trade that well early on in the game, like at level 2, because you're probably going to want to go W level 1 and then E level 2. So you can like W in and then like double shield back out. Just for some nice little trades, but he doesn't have like a super great all-in. Level 3 is okay, but you can run out of mana pretty quickly in the early game by spamming your spells, because the W does cost quite a bit of mana to max, which is what he typically is going to max. I think it starts at 50 and goes up by 10 per levels, is something like that. But it's pretty steep in terms of the cost, so he's good. He's very unique. So that's the thing that makes me want to put him always like not much lower than B tier, because he's unique, because he's an enchanter that engages, and that just opens up so many different strategic options that other champs just aren't going to have. The fact that he can get the big buffs without sacrificing the engage. He can get the healing, he can get the shielding and the protection without having to invest in tank items. So he's just very unique, and I think very powerful in the right circumstances if you're strong on him. So I think Rakan is almost always a good option if you're good on him, but you got to be careful, especially against a lot of CC out there, which is very prevalent right now. Okay, and then Thresh has been doing really well, but he is also very hard to play. So kind of like Rakan, he's, you know, one of the best champions in pretty much any meta if you're very good on him. A lot of the cooldown reduction stuff, the ability haste, as it's called now, has really helped him out a ton. The fact that you can get Locket early, and he's someone who goes for Locket plus Redemption, which gives you kind of supreme team fighting. There aren't that many other champions that are getting Redemption, because they're usually getting Moonstone and Staff of Flowing Water, but he can't really, I mean, he can get those, but it's not going to be as effective on him. But Redemption is something that's actually pretty decent. It has nice ability haste. It's got the plus 20% healing and shielding, which does affect the Locket shield. Don't forget that. It does affect Guardian, which is what more and more people are going towards. And it does affect your W, which puts out a pretty good shield based on the amount of souls that you've collected. So plus healing and shielding, not as crazy on him as it has been on other champs, but it's decent. And a lot of it is not affected by Grievous Wounds, right? The Redemption proc itself is, but not Locket, not Guardian, not your W. So a pretty good split of damage mitigation options there. And then the CDR, like I mentioned before, is just super strong on him because of how his hook scales, right? Whenever you hit the hook, it's minus 3 seconds off of whatever the base is. So, you know, if the base is 12 seconds, then it's 11-second cooldown on it. But if you get a bunch of CDR, if you get, you know, 75 ability haste or whatever to take it down to the equivalent of 40% CDR, then maybe you go down to 7 seconds on your hook, and then you land the hook, and then it goes down to a 4-second cooldown. So it just allows you to spam more and more hooks if you keep hitting targets in fights. As you can see, his win rate falls off pretty dramatically late game, and that's just because he just doesn't get any of those like the Staff of Flowing Water, the Moonstone, and stuff like that, which just kind of scales to the roof. And he doesn't have any like you know, amplifiers on your team, right? He doesn't have like the Lulu buffs or the Yuumi buffs or like the Seraphine like massive team fight AoE. He's okay. He just brings a lot of utility, but it's very skill based, and you need to close out. You need to hit your hooks. You need to be able to make some big plays with your lanterns. He has been getting played in pro a lot recently and does have a pretty good win rate. So he's just a nice all-around champ, but you got to use your tempo. You got to get ahead early. He is kind of it is difficult to play him into tanks when there are not a lot of very good hook targets, and you're going to continue to see that, I think, in the jungle. You're going to see lots of Udyr, Skarner, and Rammus, are my predictions. They're still going to be super strong in the jungle right now. And then you're still going to see, like, Rel, Leona, Alistar, things like that are going to be very popular. Now, you will still see enchanters that you can hook, but that's rough. I think Ezreal's going to make a big comeback. Like, this new build is very fun. It's very powerful. It's, like, the best thing that's happened to Ezreal in a long time, I think, with the Essence Reaver, Dustblade. Check out my ADC tier list video if you want to know more about it. It's getting played a lot in pros, so that means you're going to see it a lot more in solo queue. And then you're also still going to see a lot of Kai'Sa and a lot of Vayne. So it's going to be Kai'Sa, Vayne, Ezreal. Good luck hitting hooks on them consistently. They are very, very difficult to hit with hooks. So I think those are 3 roles where it's going to be difficult to have high quality targets, either because it's tank or because it's highly mobile. Now you might still be able to get some of the mid laners with the hooks, maybe the top laners. Top laners are going to be these fighter type of champs. Usually kind of your gore drinker champs are still going to be up there. So I think that's going to make it really hard on Thresh. But he still has a 53% win rate, and that's a lot of that is what people are picking right now. So if you're good on him, you can definitely make it work. But an extreme skill check champion, you better bring the heat if you're going to be playing Thresh, because he just does not have a lot of guaranteed power. He doesn't have the buffs. His base stats are really low for a tank early. He has very low base armor. He has to collect a lot of souls before he starts catching up with the Leonas, the Alistars, and stuff like that. So we'll see. So high win rate, I respect it. You can be very good on him, but I just think that you're having to really sweat a lot to keep up with what some of these other people can get, without even breaking a sweat. And then Bard is another one that I played him a lot near the end of last season, and we were doing all right on him, and I just have not really liked him very much this season, but it's hard to deny he has a 53% win rate. He's doing all right. So the big change to Bard was they took away Athene's Unholy Grail, which I think he was someone who relied on that more than almost anyone else, because his W healing is super anemic. It just does not heal for very much at all, but you could put out pretty good damage. I think it maxed out at like 150 heal. But if you put out good damage with your auto attacks and your Q, you could start store up the charges on the Athenes, and then your W would actually put out respectable amount of healing. It would put out, like 300 healing. It's like, okay, that's pretty good. But now the heal just feels really rough without that. He is pretty good with Mandate, right? Like, you can stack this on people with your auto attacks because they do apply a slow. The problem there is, like, you might be losing out. If you start auto-attacking them first before your ally follows up, then the reapplication of the Mandate does not do the extra damage anymore, so that's kind of feels bad. But it's still okay. It still gives him the CDR. It still, in a team fight, is going to give him some extra damage. So it's still alright. But so much of Bard is just how well can you roam around and make plays, right? You're still going to get the mobility boots or boots of swiftness, and you're still going to get Deadman's. Deadman's was nerfed couple of patches ago, but it's still going to be pretty strong. And after that, the game's probably over, honestly, most of the time, but you could get, like, Rapid Fire Cannon, I guess. Shurelya's is actually a pretty decent option on him as well, or Locket. People are getting these, so Locket actually has the highest win rate. So he has a few different options in terms of what you want to do. I would say most of the time you want to do Deadman's second. Redemption can be pretty decent as well. It does look like Frozen Heart's actually a pretty decent option also if you're against a lot of AD champs. So he does have some different builds that are pretty good. And the nice thing about him is you can engage from that really long range. Now, one reason why I stopped playing Bard, I was trying him some this season, but there's just so much mobility in the game right now, right? Like, all the AD carries, so many of them are still taking Gale Force, which just allows them to jump right out of your ult if they want to. And then you're just seeing a lot of, like, Proto Belt, Stride Breaker. I think Stride Breaker, you have to have a target to jump to that. But then you're still seeing, like, the Ezreal Vayne, Kai'Sa, who can, pretty easily jump out of your ultimate. So I think, and, if you're ulting tanks, kind of like what I was just talking about with Thresh, it's the same sort of problems. Like, if you're just ulting tanks, most of the time, it's nice, but it's going to be a lot harder to convert those into really good plays. So very good against enchanters, so if you do see like a Yuumi or a Lulu or something, they can't get out of it very easily without using flash or ultimate, that is. And if you landed on them, they're probably going to die. So those are good targets. Or if you see someone who's not getting Gale Force that's immobile, almost every immobile champ's going to get it. But if for some reason they don't, or if it's on cooldown, if you're tracking the cooldown carefully on it, then you can still make plays. Or if you can force them to use the Gale Force first, right? Like, you come up and you just Q them and start auto-attacking them, and they're going to die, and then they Gale Force, then you might be able to ult them. So you got to be just a little sneakier. They did buff Banshees as well, and Edge of Night is still a decent option on a lot of lethality champ, so there's just a more bubbles coming around than ever before. So I just think that it's kind of rough, but if you do roam really well with Bard, you can obviously make him work. He's difficult to play, and yet he does have a 53% win rate, so, something good's happening there, so I'll just put him in tier 2. Nami's another one. We'll speed up, so I definitely do want to keep this under an hour, but She's still going to be like pretty strong. She didn't rely as much on Moonstone as some of the other champs just because she's one of the only enchanters that has really heavy kill threat in the lane. Because if you land your bubble, you can all in and take people out pretty early, pretty easily. So she does get the Moonstone, and it will affect her a bit. I think Locket or Mandate actually has a much better win rate than Moonstone, even though it's saying that people are getting Moonstone. And I tend to like Mandate more just because I want to get those kills early. I want to get that damage and snowball because you will get outscaled by other enchanters. You don't have like significant buffs for your allies. Like you're not going to be able to match the Lulu or the Yuumi in terms of scaling. Yes, you do give some on-hit stuff with your E, but it's not the same as giving them an extra like 40% attack speed and 30% movement speed and all this stuff. Now, speaking of movement speed, though, like when you combine Mandate with her passive, and you combine that with Staff of Flowing Water, you're giving a lot of extra movement speed to people. Mandate's giving 20%. I think your passive is like a flat 40, I think, movement speed, and then Staff of Flowing Water is another 20% or 15% movement speed. So you're giving out a lot of movement speed to people, so that is pretty nice. Your ultimate is very good follow-up CC. It does that initial little hit on people. It's got really long range on it. So she has a lot of stuff going on, a lot of CC. The big thing is just being able to point-click trade with your W. So it makes her very good against, the stuff like the Yuumi and the Lulu and stuff like that early, the Jannas, because they're not going to be able to keep up with your trading probably. And then if you land the bubble on someone who doesn't have a dash or whatever, oftentimes that can be a kill if you have a Jhin or just Tristana or anything else that can go aggressive early. So I still think she's pretty good. It's just she's going to be vulnerable, just like a lot of the other enchanters. Difficult to get vision later on in the game against, heavy CC burst teams, which is almost every team. And it's going to be difficult rotating up and down the river, especially if you don't control the vision around those areas because you can get jumped and you can get killed. But still going to be pretty good if you're looking for that type of thing. And then Nautilus is another one that I think is still going to be pretty respectable, still pretty strong. It's got the point-click ultimate. Very nice against these heavily mobile champs. The Kai'Sa, Vayne, Ezreal bunch. If you get into range, you press R, they cannot get away from it. So that is very handy. And then huge hitbox on your Q. Very easy to zone people off and, have a lot of kill pressure early. You can even get away with that Q if you're in a tough situation. So that is pretty nice. He is a bit squishier than some of the other big tanks in the early game. He only has, I think, 37 base armor versus, I believe, Rell and Leona. I know Leona has 44. I think Rell also has something like that, 44. So they're just going to be a lot tougher in the early game, and they have way better defensive steroids than he does. Like, he just has that wimpy little shield on his W. And the big thing is his mana costs are exorbitant later on. Like, he used to be such a strong tank with the old Presence of Mind because you got 500 free mana and you got the mana refund off of it. And his E costs so much. It's like 90 mana. So you can spam it and it does a lot of damage in team fights. But now you're out of mana after like 4 E's. So anyways, he definitely has some major mana issues compared to some of the other tanks. If you want to do what he does best, which is like big AoE damage in fights. So I think that has hurt him a little bit. The Frozen Heart buff was actually pretty nice. A lot of people probably aren't getting that on him. But if you do want to do that, then he definitely can leverage the extra mana that you can get off of that item. Yeah, his win rate just kind of falls into the gutter compared to some of the other ones, which is why I have him a bit lower. Also, he can't hook over walls, which is kind of a bummer. Like, it helps you escape that you can hook into walls, but yeah, I mean, it's got a 62% win rate as a second item. It's not something people get a lot, but if they have a very heavy AD team, this could be pretty nice, because he really does like the extra mana, armor, ability haste, all that stuff's really good on him. So anyways, he's okay. It's just, he does have the guaranteed engage in team fights, but it's harder to make skirmisher plays just because he can't go through minions very well. Like Leona, like Rell, they can both just engage through minions. He really can't. And he can't go over the walls, which is sort of feels bad. Okay, and then last few champs here, because like I said, I do want to keep it under an hour. We'll just mention the ones that are kind of I shifted around on here a bit. Alistar I have down just a little bit lower. I just feel like he gets beaten by a lot of the other top-end champions right now. He is very good if you consistently roam well and you get really nice flanks and team fights. I think that he can be good. He just falls off so hard later. He has his CC is a lot less conditional, and it's just a lot less of it, I think, than someone like Rell or Leona. He does have the extra sustain in the laning phase, so that does make him, it does help your team out be a little bit more resilient to poke. So if you're playing something like Vayne or Kai'Sa against Miss Fortune, that can be a really nice boon. You can help your ADC sort of mitigate a little bit of that, make it rain spam. So that's kind of nice. But I am down just a little bit there. Braum moved up from, I think he was in C, and I moved him up to B, or at least higher in B, just because he did get the cooldown on his ultimate. So that is nice. I think situationally he can be pretty good into anything that's going to be like huge AoE, big hitting ultimates. So like Brand ultimate, Miss Fortune ultimate, Twitch ultimate, just anything like that where your shield's going to be super useful. I think Braum could be okay. Galio, a lot better in pro, but can be good in solo queue, especially if you're duoed with somebody that plays like a really strong engaged champ, so like a Hecarim or even a Udyr or something like that can just run into a situation and have you ult on top of them and really leverage that. Obviously great with Camille's and things of that nature. Pretty good trading early on. The Turbo Chem Tank's actually very nice on him, I think, in the support role. A lot of people don't do that, or like the Shirelias, I think, can be pretty good. Just anything that can get you into that taunt range. So I think he's pretty decent. And the rest of these I don't have in any like hard defined order. I just think they're all like on a similar sort of level. So Brand's okay, good damage early, but has to build a Leandries, which is bad. I don't think I ended up pulling up Zyra out of here. I thought I had Zyra. Yeah, let me pull her up here. I'll just put her next to Brand. I think they are similar. I did play Zyra the other night, and she's okay. I would just much rather play Maokai just because he can use Mandate, and like these Brand and Zyra really can't anymore. At least not that effectively. They can get Rylai's and use it with Rylai's, but I think that's too gimmicky. You just need to go Leandries into Demonic Embrace most of the time, and they look really good if you get very far ahead. If you get like 5 or 6 kills with them, they look awesome, but if you don't, they just are going to fall behind some of the other enchanters, I think. Blitzcrank, really good if you're up against some of these squishy champs, you know, like a Seraphine, a Lulu, Yuumi, that type of stuff. But like I mentioned with some of the other skill shot champs, when you're against Vayne, Ezreal, Kai'Sa, stuff like that, you lose a lot of value on the hook because it's going to be very hard to hit them, and you just don't have anything else left in your kit other than the hook most of the time. The shield breaking ult is nice against Sterix and stuff like that, but Rel's just going to be a more well-rounded champ that deals with that kind of stuff. Shaco I dropped down a bit more. I haven't seen as much Shaco this patch. I tried him out. If you're really good on him, I can understand the value, but you know, the fact that you do have to get more expensive items, he might be able to go Mandate. I think a lot of people go Leandries on him, but he's just so conditional, you know, kind of like what I was talking about with Thresh. You're just sweating so hard to get any value out of this champ when other champs can just do it much, much easier. So he's okay. He's cool. Like, if you enjoy playing him, he's fine. But I just think that Maokai is just way better if you want, like, just the traps and the boxes and whatever, doing massive damage. The seeds are just going to crush the boxes, in my opinion, most of the time. Soraka did get some significant buffs this patch, so we'll see. I mean, maybe she could go up to A tier, but I think at the end of the day, she's just kind of a healing bot. She does have some other stuff she can do, but the global is nice, especially with a lot of the extra cooldown reduction. That is handy, but I just think that there's too much Grievous Wounds, and with the nerf to Moonstone and the buffs to several different Grievous Wounds items, most notably Morellonomicon, I think there's just going to be too many minus 60% out there, and that's really going to hurt your healing overall. But if they don't have that stuff, or if you're against heavy poke champions, the stuff like a Maokai, stuff like an Ezreal, she's going to gain a little bit of extra value. Swain can be very strong if you constantly land your roots, especially if you have something like a Jhin, Miss Fortune, Trist, something that's very aggressive early on. He can definitely be a pest. Veigar, as I said before, you know, it's going to be easier to spam your Qs if you're against an all melee team. You know, he can definitely be very valuable with that cage. Malphite, you know, I've played against this before, and it seems kind of troll. It seems like it's bad, but to be honest, he does have the renewable shield in the early game, and if you just take, you know, some runes that help you out, some extra protection, and you just survive to level 6, if it's just a farm off, he does have a super powerful ultimate. I mean, you can't deny that. Yes, it is going to be easier for, like, the Ezreal, the Vaynes, and stuff like that to dodge him, but it can just do a ton of damage and has great combos with Yasuo and Samira, who's probably just going to disappear on this patch, but there could be some decent options there. The last couple that I'll mention, Karma is something that I get asked about a lot. She did get some buffs recently. Her big problem is she just doesn't have a lot of CC, and she's just going to get outshined by a lot of the other enchanters later on in most games. I have seen her do well. You know, she can go Staff of Flowing Water and Moonstone, and that's pretty good with your ultimate shield, but there's probably better options. Her win rate is really, really low. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.